Welcome, everyone. We know that you have a lot to manage right now during the age of COVID. We are joined for a great conversation about the new normal, how to prepare for back to school post-COVID-19. And we're joined by a distinguished group of panelists. First, Arne Duncan, most of you know, is the former U.S. Secretary of Education. He's also a managing partner at the Emerson Collective and a board member for DreamBox Learning. Secondly, we have Dr. Antonio Burt, the Chief Academic Officer of Shelby County Schools in Alabama. Thirdly, Dr. Darren Brawley, Superintendent of Compton Unified School District in California. And finally, Mark Estrada, Superintendent of Lockhart ISD in Texas. And I am Jessie Woolley-Wilson, the President and CEO of DreamBox Learning. Welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you giving us your precious time. In today's New York Times opinion section, some of you may have read an article entitled "The Coronavirus's Lost Generation of Students." It talks about learning setbacks over summers that typically wipes out 1 to 2 months of academic growth. And it also mentions that over 50,000 students are already shut out of schools across the United States. But the thing that caught my attention in this op-ed was the data that they shared about the anticipated cumulative loss of learning that they think could be catastrophic. 30% loss of academic learning and reading, but math loss would be more severe, between 50 and 100% learning loss. What are states and district leaders to do? Arne, can you give us some thoughts about what risks and opportunities you might see for learners and learning guardians as they rapidly shift to distant learning model?
Obviously, this is a horrific time for everybody, and hopefully not just a once-in-a-generation crisis, but a once-in-a-century crisis, and extraordinarily tough. And I'm sure many of the people watching this have lost friends or loved ones. I lost a good friend Saturday night. So this thing is more than real and really wicked. But what do we do in a tough time? We have to figure out how to make something good, something positive come out of it. And if there's any silver lining on the education side, it does make me think it's a chance to reimagine things and to think very differently. And I've said repeatedly that for me, the goal is not to go back to normal, because normal didn't serve far too many children across the country well, and particularly children in disadvantaged and marginalized communities that are most vulnerable. So can we collectively think about something that's very, very different and better for all kids? And again, one of the few benefits of this horrific time, it is slapping all of us in the face to really see and understand and feel the massive inequities in opportunity. So just a couple thoughts. Can we once and for all close the digital divide and give everybody not just access to devices, but access to the internet, to Wi-Fi? Talked yesterday to my friend Pedro Martinez, who's a superintendent in San Antonio. He has 49,000 students. He had to give out 47,000 devices. Those kids didn't have those at home. And why shouldn't we give every single child around the country a chance to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere? Why should learning be confined to a school building from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock? Can we think differently about the school day, the school year? Can we once and for all move from seat time to competency? Do you pass algebra because you sat in a seat for 9 months, 4 or 5 days a week, or do you pass algebra when you know algebra, whether that's after 3 months or 9 months or 12 months or 15 months? Talked to another friend this morning, Bob Runcie, the superintendent in Broward County. He comes from a background, he gets his stuff, he's lived it. What he's got, his high school, it's easier at the high school side, but on the high school side, he has his teachers doing lectures to their students, 125, 150 kids in the morning, and then using the rest of the day for small group instruction and office hours. And think about how much more productive that is than doing the same lecture 4 or 5 times each day, repeating it to children. So in this horrible time, in this crisis, there's an absolute chance to think very differently, to reimagine what education looks like. the final quick thing I'll say is, for me, honestly, as important as this is, there's some other things right now that are more important to me. We have school districts everywhere feeding thousands and thousands of kids, hundreds of thousands of kids across the country, tens of millions of children every single day, children, parents, families. We have to take care of students' social and emotional needs. Telehealth, psychologists, social workers, checking in at home. So we have to take care of all those things first, and then let's talk about how we reinvent and how we strengthen education for all, and finally close these equity and opportunity gaps.
Thank you, Arne. I mean, as I listen to you talk, I think about the leadership challenges of getting all that you just articulated done. Mark, as you prepare your kids to return to school, how do you plan to assess where students are and decide if the social emotional challenges that Arne was just talking about should be part of the re-onboarding strategy when schools reopen?
Sure, I think that's an important question. As Arne mentioned, I want to talk about first what we're doing now, because I think the more we can do to keep kids healthy, keep them engaged, just keeping in contact with them, quite frankly, to show them that we love them, we're here for them, their teachers are here for them, I think is important leading up to whenever we do return to the school buildings. But I think there are a lot of things that we're discussing about, and some of them Mr. Duncan mentioned. What is the school day going to look like? How can we group kids differently? How can we be more strategic with how we identify those learning gaps, the social emotional supports that may be needed. It's going to push us to really think differently to support our kids. Obviously we know that during a typical summer you have a summer slide, but I think this is really going to push us to think very differently about what does the school day look like. Are there things that we used to do that we no longer need to do, or maybe certainly aren't as important for us to do in the short term as we assess our kids and see where they're at. We've just talked a lot about in our district, I know a lot of people say it, but this is a time to really focus on Maslow before Bloom's. And until we get that right, forcing kids into academics is going to be very hard. We know that's important. We got to get there, but we've got to transition them and support them through this time, and then do things differently when school opens up, brick and mortar.
Thank you very much. And Darren, you've been investing in next generation learning for several years through your efforts with the League of Innovative Schools and Digital Promise. Despite your readiness for online learning, were there a couple surprises that even you encountered at Compton when schools closed?
Yeah, there were some surprises, both on both sides of that coin, if you will. Our ability to adapt rapidly, that was rather surprising. I mean, within literally a couple of days, we had a plan that was ready to go and ready to roll out. Also, the dispelling of beliefs, about connectivity within low-income areas. The vast majority of our community was connected. And I would say if you look at the 22,000 students, we identified about 900 students that did not have connectivity. So that's about a little less than 0.5%. And so that was surprising, because there's this belief that low-income families cannot afford internet things, and other sorts of things. But we found that our community was connected for the most part, and we were able to shift very rapidly in terms of focusing on those students that did not have connectivity. The generosity of partners, partners like Verizon, if you will, and what we were able to accomplish through them, through our Verizon Innovative Learning schools. They allowed us to redistribute the iPads that had internet connectivity built into them to the students that did not have internet connectivity. And then we were able to redistribute other devices that those students could use at home because they had connectivity at home. So the generosity of partners was very important. Also, the ability of our teachers to adapt rather rapidly. It's one thing to put them through training that prepares them for something like this, but it's quite something else to see the implementation and see them pull it off. So very, very proud of what they were able to accomplish.
Thank you. Antonio, you've had some very interesting things to say about this leadership dynamic around a mind shift, because we can all talk about what we want to do, but it's quite another thing to inspire people to want to do and embrace the change that you see as we move toward more next generation schooling models. Can you tell us a little bit about your mind shift and what you did to cultivate it? And Shelby?
Yes, most definitely. So one of the things we did this year in preparation of transitioning to the digital age was really have a pilot group where we focus on providing really change management amongst adults of what it means to be a true distance learning environment ecosystem. So with that, we focus on the adult and what the adult actions would be as far as delivering instruction differently from where we traditionally view instruction. So with that, we went through the process of cascading our vision, but also talking about outlaying what those adult actions would look like on a daily basis. We identified the type of instructional model that we want to see inside of classrooms and away from classrooms with adults. And we rolled out a year-long scope and sequence as far as building adult capacity around truly implementing a one-to-one model to really provide enrichment opportunity for students to move instruction to the next level. So this year was spent totally around building capacity around what does the instructional outlook resemble inside of our classrooms.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'd like to take some time now to just envision, what the world is going to look like, what our new normal. A lot of people are anxious to get back to school and maybe parents even anticipate that their kids are going to go back to what they left. But I think we all know on this call that there's going to be a new normal in K-12 education. And I'd love, Arne, for you to share with us some thoughts about what do you think are some of the lasting changes will be as kids go back to school?
Yeah, I think the short answer is none of us truly know. This is all obviously, new territory for us, an unprecedented time. I do worry tremendously about the social and emotional health and well-being of kids. We have lots of kids who have been under lots of stress and trauma already, and those numbers just exploded. And we're seeing the unemployment numbers. We're seeing the challenges there. You have kids and families that, maybe we're doing sort of okay. We're living check to check, but they were making it, and those checks are gone. And they may or may not be coming back anytime soon. I'm spending time every week talking to superintendents and folks working in the food space, and the demand for food is just exploding. Every week, 50%, 70%, 80% up. So the need to take care of kids socially and emotionally will be tremendous. The need to take care of families, the need to feed them. And we talked earlier about sort of the hierarchy of needs. If we do those things, then let's talk about, AP biology and physics and chemistry. But those are the kinds of things. Schools have always been social safety nets, but that's going to be true now more than ever before. Again, the flip side of this, if we start to think about kids learning anything they want, anytime, anywhere, any place, that for me is the hope, the opportunity as we move forward on the educational, on the academic side.
Do you actually think that most schools are going to be back in session this fall? I mean, when you talk about the security and safety and the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy, do you think schools are going to be equipped?
So again, honestly, no one truly knows. I think while not every district or state has said it, I think the odds of going back this academic year are basically zero. And all the superintendents I'm talking to, there's sort of three different options. One is if we can go back this summer, and that's a big if. Could we have a massive, maybe even mandatory summer school to try and get kids back in class, get parents working again, get teachers back working? If that's not possible, obviously we'll see what happens in the fall. And I think the truth, Jessie, is this is going to be, for the next foreseeable future, we may open some places and then have to close back again. This is not turning on a light switch and everything happens automatically. This is going to be thoughtful. It's got to be slow. It's got to be absolutely trying to minimize the risk, both to students and to teachers and to custodians and to principals and to lunchroom attendants. And so we may go back up for a little while and we may have to come back down again. And we have to be prepared for that. This is not going to be the sun comes out one day and we're all right back at it. That's not going to be the case. So are we back up this school year? I think highly unlikely. Are we back up this summer? I hope so. I don't know. Are we up in many places in the fall? I think so. I mean, we're focused more on K-12. There's a chance K-12 opens up, but higher ed can't. So we got to be ready for all these different permutations, and every superintendent has to have an A plan and a B plan and C plan, and be using this time to deal with a crisis, but to also be thinking ahead. And I just got to say, for all the horrific leadership or lack of leadership at the federal level, what I'm seeing from superintendents, what I'm seeing from mayors, what I'm seeing from governors, that leadership at the local and state level, I can't tell you how inspiring it is. People are working hard, they're solving problems together, they're collaborating, there's no competition here. And so that honestly gives me tremendous hope that we will get through this and get through this together.
Well, we're hearing from parents and are seeing emerging tension. Parents are weary. They're tired. They're working from home. They're trying to be the primary school custodian, learning custodian for their kids, and they're just trying to keep everybody healthy. And what we're hearing from parents is they're really hoping schools come back soon, because they need a sense of relief, because they're doing their jobs remotely and they're also trying to be the primary learning guardian as they try to explore new relationships with teachers. Do you see that tension being resolved, Arne?
Well, let me be really, really clear here. And, we're all feeling that tension. My wife and I have 2 teens now, and we're doing the homeschooling thing like everybody else. When I ran Chicago Public Schools for 7.5 years, we never missed a day of school, ever. We never had a snow day. We never had a strike. I know more than anyone, or as much as anyone, how important it is to be in school, not just for the education standpoint, but for parents, for safety, for health, for feeding. But again, I want to be explicitly clear here. We cannot go back to school until it is safe to do that. And children can be asymptomatic carriers. Children can be spreading this disease to staff, back home, to mom, to grandma, to dad, whatever. They can do that and never even know they're sick. And this is a matter of life and death. And so what's a little inconvenient, what's hard, where we're weary, we all feel that. I'm sympathetic, but I just got to reiterate, that is not the reason to go back to physical school. The reason and the time to go back to physical school, it is when it is safe to do that, and we do not have the chance of infecting each other and seeing people die. No one has any interest. We talk about the hierarchy of needs. The first need, the first demand for all of us is to keep our children, our teams, our staff, our faculty safe and alive. That's the first need. Everything else goes way, way, way below that.
Well, with the uncertainty about the timing of the return to school, Antonio, you've spoken a lot about your concern that 2020 could be literally a lost year in learning. 2020, a lost year in learning. Can you describe your plans to leverage extended learning strategies to help kids catch up on learning as long as schools are closed?
Yes. So in Memphis, one of the things that we did once we identified that we would be out for an extended period of time, we developed a comprehensive learning guide that really focused on the major work of each grade and those standards that kids would need to master to ensure that they were on grade level. I think what this new normal is preparing us to do within the city of Memphis is have a more cohesive approach from public education, local government, and state government to really eliminate the have and have-nots. So we've begun to develop a plan to really truly provide, the devices for students to extend learning away from school. With that, we see more of a alignment, and our approach is really looking at extending the school year beyond the traditional 180 days to really close the gap, because a lot of our kids may enter in not on grade level. So we've already sketched out that plan, and we've built out a plan to show what this could potentially look like if we added 4 hours on Saturdays to target those skills, to focus on those gap closure areas that we know kids lost this year, but also that's an annual challenge that's dependent upon those standards at each grade level.
Thank you. And Mark, how are you enabling access to devices and connectivity to ensure equity for all, especially as so many of your families in your community are in rural settings?
Sure. So I think, when we talk about thriving during this time, it's understanding that we have to build systems and structures that in order for us to be resilient in times of trouble, but also in times where things are going well. And in our district, as you mentioned, 60% of our kids live out in rural areas of our county. We cover well over 300 square miles, and the majority of our kids live out in rural areas. As Darren mentioned earlier, sometimes we can think of kids coming from poverty not being connected, and he's experiencing the opposite of that in Compton. But we experience in a rural community is that there's no connectivity. So it's not a matter of can a family afford it. It's a matter of there are no options, there are no providers, there's no access, even if you can't afford it. And that goes for our staff too. So we've been over the last really 2 years looking at how can we close that digital divide, and certainly this crisis positioned us to work and find a partner to where we're able to build internet towers around our county in places where it's never existed before. So we're going to connect 100% of not only our students and our families, but that we're able to do that for our community. But I think it's also a broader conversation of, why is it so that there's so many people in the United States who have no access to internet? And so we're very proud of our ability to do that, because we know that it's going to make our community more resilient for whatever comes in the future as well.
When I think about all that you, in your seat as superintendent, have to manage day to day, especially post-COVID, and then I think about what you had to do to collect partners to actually put up towers. I don't think that when you became a superintendent, you ever thought that part of your job description would be to put towers, communications towers, so that rural communities could have access to online learning.
Yeah, and I think, I'm very proud because, as I mentioned, we've been trying to do this for a couple years, and we were just coming into every roadblock you can imagine, or not just cost, but other roadblocks, red tape and bureaucracy and those types of things. And, I'm happy to talk to any superintendent out there who's interested in jumping into what we did and how we're able to do it in a very cost-effective way. And that we'll have the connectivity for the long term on a separate email. If they email me, I'm happy to have that conversation with folks.
That's great. And we also have a Q&A session at the end for people who want a little more detail. So Darren, I'd love to turn to you. You've talked a lot about your professional development model and how it's evolved over the years. How have you leveraged professional development to prepare your district to thrive after you were forced to close schools in COVID? I know you've had a lot in play. And if you could specifically talk about how you have changed the role of your content specialists to directly support Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction in Compton, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we've conducted countless numbers of professional development. We've trained over 600 teachers in Google Classroom. We have a team of instructional specialists within our ITD department that has led the way in this area. An additional component of distance learning has been the incorporation of 32 curriculum specialists that we hired this year. Those used to be out at the school sites, but we centralized those at the district office because we wanted to focus on students that were really in need of Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction. When I think about what we've accomplished around the PD, EdTech will be providing an additional 45 PD sessions for teachers that need it, and some of that is happening right now because we're on spring break. And that training is in Google Classroom Beginner, Google Classroom, Google Suite, OBS Studio. how to create content in YouTube, podcasting, Edpuzzle, etc. But the interesting thing in terms of the second part of your question, we have our students being provided core instruction by their regular teachers. So we also have our 32 curriculum specialists continuing with the interventions that were in place for the Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. So in addition to what the students are getting through their regular teacher in terms of core curriculum, our students are still getting interventions through distance learning in addition to what they're receiving from their teachers. Part of that is the incorporation of DreamBox. We see that as a very beneficial tool, able to meet students where they are and adapt along the way to what their needs are, as opposed to some of the other things that, give a shot in time and you provide an application based on that. We see DreamBox as an excellent tool in the area of math to meet students where they are and to continue adapting to what their needs are.
Well, thank you. I mean, as we think about impact, and we think about what you are doing, Darren, actually in your district, Nicole shared with me that I know that you have 78% Hispanic kids, but I also know that your kids are progressing academically 5 times faster than other districts in the state of California, and that Compton actually was ranked #1 when compared with 38 similar districts in the state. Can you tell us a little bit about how you achieved these results in mathematics and how you brought your teacher corps, your learning guardians, along with this bold vision?
Yeah, so we accomplished that in a number of different ways. Part of it pertains to the focus on instruction and the implementation of specialists at the school site level then, last year. Now they're at the district office. And also the implementation of various tools, one of them being DreamBox, as well as others. And the constant focus on data. Some people would call it Plan, Do, Study, Act, old acronym, but that's very well implemented within Compton, both in ELA and math. And we have a very rigorous system where we're constantly looking at how students are performing, analyzing that performance, forming different groups for intervention, and measuring the progress along the way and adapting continuously. So, hats off to the educators in Compton, as well as the administrators that lead that process.
Well, thank you. I mean, sometimes in our conversations with district leaders, we talk a lot about the importance of a conceptual understanding of the mathematics to go beyond memorization and practice to really cultivate a deep understanding of mathematics. And I understand that you have a couple components as part of your strategy. I think 3 components, and that conceptual understanding was just one of those. Can you tell us a little bit more about your strategy and how adaptive personalized learning fits into it?
Yeah, so interesting you mentioned the conceptual understanding. So we have a partnership with UCI that focuses solely on that. And they come in and provide training to our teachers, as well as in classroom coaching on the conceptual understanding lessons. We spend a lot of time with that component. And then we provide the relevant resources necessary for students to be met where they're at. And so, whether it's DreamBox or whether it's another form of technology that we use, we make sure that we match that to what the students' needs are. And we blend as many of those together as we can, because we see them as uniquely different in terms of what they accomplish. And so, it's a coherent process that is really looking at what we want to gain. We realize that conceptual understanding was the biggie that was missing in terms of our students being able to grasp all the other components. And so we focused a lot on that, and we brought in the necessary tools to assist us along the way, UCI Math, DreamBox, as well as others.
Thank you. And Mark, you've tell us your DreamBox story. I mean, grew your students 1.5 years in every year you've been using it. Can you tell us more about how you achieve those results? Oh, you're not on. Your audio isn't on. We're going to try one more time. Try again, Mark. So we're still having audio problems. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay, good. So I apologize for that. I'm not sure what happened. I don't recall pushing it. But so on our journey with DreamBox, if we can go back, as you mentioned, our initiative for 1.5, our expectation is that every teacher in math and reading grow their students 1.5 years in kinder through 8th grade. And that stems back from work about 4 years ago. We identified that, like many school districts, our kids were coming into 3rd grade or coming into 6th grade, well below grade level, far too many of them. And we just kind of mapped it out and we said, what are we going to do to close these gaps so that our kids are not only on grade level, but pushing above grade level. So it's for all students, our highest performing kids to our lowest, most struggling student as well. 4 years ago, we had about less than 20% of our kids who were making, more than a year or 1.5 years of growth by the end of the school year. To date, we're at about 77% of our kids who are growing 1.5 years. So we just had a massive, improvement in accelerating the growth of each child at every level of the spectrum. And we've done that by all the way from our boardroom to the living room. As we say, our board of trustees every month receives a presentation on how we're doing by each grade level, by each campus, by each teacher, each classroom, and we look at it kid by kid. And our board of trustees has really bought in, and it's one of the very few district goals that we have. It's by far the largest part of my evaluation on how we're moving kids, every month. And it's a conversation that we have with our board, with our leadership team, our principal team, our CNI team. We share the information with our parents, our kids, of course, they understand their monthly goals. And it's just a part of the culture now that our expectation is, to grow them 1.5 years. I would hope that a kid goes to school a year, they grow a year. You talk to a teacher, it's like, you've done a good job, you've grown them 1 year, but that's expected. We need to do more. And we have to expect more out of ourselves because growing them 1 year does them no good if they're already behind.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of mind shifts going on in your district as well, Mark.
Yeah, and it took some time, but we're over the hump and our teachers have bought in now.
So I want to ask you, superintendents, how you are thinking about this stimulus funding. So everyone's reading the reports about $13 billion as part of the CARES Act. And just today I saw an additional $3 billion that the Department of Education is releasing to governors, with very little strings attached, I think, and very little guidelines to try to expedite getting them additional funding to help them as they prepare to continue distant learning and as there is continued uncertainty about when schools will reopen. How are you guys thinking about stimulus funding? How are you thinking about how you're going to use that? How are you thinking about how you'll prioritize those funds, using those funds once you get that? If I could hear from all of you, it'd be great. Antonio, can we start with you?
Yes, so one of the things that we're focused on with the stimulus fund is really leveraging from closing a digital divide. We know that these funds will be a one-time contribution. So, when you think about how can you best leverage and what can, be continued once the funds have ended, we're looking at from a technological perspective, helping close the gap, because we also face the challenge of getting funded by county commission that sometimes may say due to sales tax, we can't provide the necessary financial resources. But we want to utilize these funds in a way where we can provide and close the gap between the have and have-nots, and then help equal the playing field from that perspective and just build on. So we're looking at embedding this with our technology plan district-wide, K-12.
Thank you. Darren, how are you thinking about it?
Well, we've been tracking all of our expenditures, and so we will be submitting invoices, if you will, to to be reimbursed for everything that was expended related to COVID-19. But one of the biggies will be the replenishment of devices. We know that some of those devices will not come back. And one of the interesting things related to insuring devices is that the insurance carriers raised their rates significantly to cover the devices because they envisioned that there would be a huge loss. So we'll be focused on replenishing devices so that we can remain where we are in terms of one-to-one devices for everyone. And some of that we've already done ourselves. We've already purchased an additional 2,500 devices, anticipating that we would lose about 10%, but we will continue to replenish other devices as well. In addition to that, connectivity. There'll be, there has to be a focus on expanding connectivity within the city so that those areas that are spotty internet connections are able to deliver better results for our students, as well as us being able to make sure that every single student is connected. We talked earlier about the 0.5% that's not. Well, we want 100% to be connected. And then I think the remaining piece has to be on intensive intervention to address the learning deficiencies that we know will occur based upon this new era that we're in. So we believe that we can solve them, but we just have to make sure that we have a solid plan of delivering excellent educational outcomes for all students, just like everyone else around the country.
Thank you. Mark, how are you thinking about stimulus funding?
Sure, certainly the technology, we're having those conversations. As Darren mentioned, we're having a lot of conversations about interventions. How's the school day going to look different? How are we going to provide more interventions to catch students up? That's another conversation. We're also having conversations with additional funding. Is it possible to we'll be able to come back to school in July? We'll be able to come back early in August. Our teachers on a 87-day contract in Texas. And right now, our teachers are required to still work. So they're eating up those contract days, because we're required to continue to get funding. So if we were to try to do summer school, we need an additional revenue source to do so. So we're looking at, is this the possibility to capture these funds to provide more summer school in person with our kids to help close those gaps?
Thank you. So Arne, that New York Times article that I mentioned in the beginning articulated a couple of remedies that they are hoping that people are considering, learning guardians and district administrators are considering. One was diagnostic testing when kids return. The second was aggressive skill plans that we've been talking. The third was an extended school calendar, be it school year or school. The fourth was outreach effort to disadvantaged kids that even not be in about options that are emerging. And the last thing they mentioned was a blueprint for states' readiness for the next crisis. Do you believe, given your previous in Chicago at the U.S. Department of Education, do you believe that these funds should be tethered to an expectation about robust plans for distance learning going forward?
I think I do just listen to your superintendents. I just have a lot of confidence in the leadership at the local level, and I think we need to support. You sort of heard a couple different things. You heard the technology theme for funds. You heard thinking about time differently for funds. I would add that sort of a third T, additional training for teachers, and how to be effective teachers in this distance learning thing. So at this point, for me, the most important, the most urgent priority is to get through this crisis and then to figure out what the summer looks like, and then the fall looks like, and then the winter looks like. I think there's a time and a place for planning, but I'm not quite sure that time is now. And I'm not even sure how effective those plans would be, or they would just be something thrown together. We need to be responsive. We need to be flexible. We need to be non-bureaucratic. We need to be listening to superintendents and trusting them to know their communities best and what they need, and empowering them to do that. Let me be clear, whatever stimulus money comes their way, that's fine. It's going to be wildly insufficient. It's not going to be enough. We're going to see going forward huge cuts in state funding. So that's going to hit all these guys and leaders across the country in a really difficult way. So it's not like there's some bonanza of funding here. We're just going to try and do a better job with the resources they do get of helping those kids that are most at risk. But having some complex plan for down the road, that for me today, that's not the priority.
Thank you. So one of the constant sources of frustration that we're hearing at DreamBox is that despite the best intentions and despite Herculean efforts, leaders such as you guys are finding it really, really challenging to meet the needs of the least well-served kids, the kids with learning disabilities, or the kids with physical disabilities, or just the most poor, the poorest kids who rely on you for food and sustenance as well as education. Do any of you have any new insights over the past month or so that you could share with our audience about strategies to meet the needs of this elusive but deserving group of kids that we're all struggling to serve?
Well, I'll start off. I wouldn't say that we struggled with meeting the needs of students related to food. We've done a very good job with that. And we have 7 sites that are open where we provide food 2 times a week, and we distribute the food for a week's worth of supply. And that's happening at 7 of our sites. We also have a partnership with the Sloan Stephens Foundation, which will be feeding an additional 135 families with 10 servings per week of food, protein, etc., as well as other things. So the food has not been a source of contention for us. Our folks have risen to the occasion to make sure that we're able to distribute food so that basic need is met. However, the special needs population, that is something that has been harder to meet. We're continuing with our IEPs virtually. A lot of districts are suspending them until school reopens. But the actual services have pressed, I think, everyone to a new level in terms of how you actually provide those services. And some of them we've been able to provide virtually. Others we're going to struggle with. So, we're doing the best that we can under the conditions. But, the needy population of our special needs student population, that's been the most difficult one to meet the needs of. And I think most of us across the nation are experiencing a similar situation in terms of meeting those needs.
Thanks, Darren. Antonio or Mark, any other thoughts?
I would just say,
agree with.
Sorry, Antonio. I would just say, I agree with Darren. We're all working through this. I think in terms of leadership right now, I believe it's very important to maintain the high expectations that we have. As Darren mentioned, there are some people who are pushing off IEPs and saying we'll deal with this later. I think our role as leaders is to push our people to think creatively on how we're going to serve our kids, how we're going to ensure that we're still providing them instructional services and support. And I think that's a huge part of our job as leaders, is to maintain those high expectations for all kids. And let's figure this out. Like that's our job, is to figure this out right now.
Antonio, thank you.
Yes, I would agree with both of the comments. I think, food, we've been able to do that quite well, serving 5 days a week at over 50 sites, and have huge commitments from some professional athletes as well. I agree with Darren. Our challenge has been comprehensive services for those students that may be, in the functional skills classes, may be receiving occupational therapy, physical therapy, may have a catheter. What does that look like when districts hire those individuals through contracted services?
Oh, we lost you, Antonio. We lost you. We lost your audio. I'm sorry. Can you try one more?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yep. So those students may be in a home with a guardian that may not be adept to even deliver the medication or provide that service. So that's our challenge when we have a large population that receives some type of service and now just not being at school to receive that service at the minimal level can be very traumatic over a long period of time. So that's what we're looking to really shore up to see how can we best provide support from a distant perspective, but still meet the needs of this delicate population.
Yes. Arne, I think you were trying to get in earlier.
No, I'm good.
So one of the things that's on my mind, as a leader of a learning technology company is how do we adapt as you adapt? And we've been working, you've all mentioned the importance of having data so you can measure your impact and you can track the need by student population. And one of the things that we had had in plans for years is a series of predictive insights that we can provide to your teachers and other learning guardians to give you a sense of where kids are and what they need. And we call it DreamBox Predictive Insights. And one of the things that has challenged us is to make sure that what we're doing is relevant to your new normal. So I'm going to ask our Chief Learning Officer, Dr. Tim Hudson, just to give you a preview of how we're trying to adapt to the new normal and to get your thoughts. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Jessie, thanks. And I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes before we get to the Q&A. But as Jessie said, as we've been adapting with our company, we realized that we were going to be launching these predictive insights that let you know throughout the course of the school year which students are on track for success on their state tests. That was going to launch this fall, and we realized once state tests got canceled, it was a great opportunity for our teams to rush and get out an early access version of this, because without state test data, that's puts you in a tougher decision for knowing how to serve students. So we're excited that in just a couple of weeks, and you'll be getting some more information this via email, but as part of the as DreamBox partner schools, you'll have access to this kind of report, which shows you which students were on track for success on the state test if it would have happened. So there's no additional testing required. The data that we need to make the predictions, we already have. So we're going to be making these monthly insights available to you at a time when you might be thinking, how would I get data otherwise? So here is it's pretty exciting. Seen for the first time. This is sort of a live video click through. You can go back to February, January, see how the predictions changed over time. Green is the students who are on track. We have it for all grades K through 5. You can see where first graders were on track. And then, look at it by grade level. You can also see how the predictions change month over month from September all the way through when the tests would have been happening. So you can use it for planning for summer school. You can use it as a proxy for how students would have done on the state test. It's 85% accurate. We've been building these predictive models for several years with partner schools, and you'll have access to individual student data as well to know how they would have performed. And we're excited to share that and provide that through this coming school year, starting in the fall, because it's a great tool for a tough time like this, and we're excited to get it out there.
Thank you, Tim. And we just saw this article this morning, and one of the things they were hoping for is that partners such as DreamBox would help folks like you with diagnostic testing when kids return. Every kid is going to have a different journey over the past several months, and you guys need a quick snapshot about where they are so you can best serve their needs. And so we modified our approach to how we use our data to try to anticipate your new normal. So at this point, I'd love to go to questions, Q&A from our attendees. Tim, I'll ask you to stay with us and help me manage through the questions that are coming in. Here's one. We talk a lot about the mental, social, emotional health of the students, which everyone agrees is of utmost importance. But how should we think about the mental, social, emotional health of the adults working with the students from a systems level? Who would like to address that?
I see that as even broader than just the adults working with the students. I mean, we oftentimes forget about the administrators and the classified staff that are on the front lines right now, doing everything that they can to make sure that we were able to pull off distance learning, and the stress that they're going through, wondering about COVID-19 and who's impacted, infected that they may be coming in contact with. And I've seen the toll that has taken on employees within our organization. And so I see it as a much broader issue. It's not just about teachers that are providing the instruction through distance learning. There's a whole another layer of employees within the organization that are putting themselves on the line day in and day out to make sure that the system continues to function. I mean, it's a misnomer to think that schools are closed. School sites are closed, but school districts are open. And, folks still have to make sure that the bills are paid, make sure that folks' payroll checks arrive. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So there's a host of people that are still working under a lot of stress, wondering, why they have to be at work when other people are not at work. And we understand that it's stressful for teachers to work in a different fashion, but it's taken its toll on everybody. I mean, you've heard the statement, a new normal. It's actually abnormal in terms of what we're used to doing. And I think we're just all going to have to adapt to it and take advantage of any of the crisis counseling that is available to you out there to get the mental health, the mental health services that you may need.
Darren, I would add also, and I agree with everything that Darren said. I would also add, teaching even before this is an incredibly stressful profession for a lot of reasons. And I think this is an opportunity in our district. What we've done is create some general guidelines and expectations for our teachers to work within, but we haven't been so we haven't taken away their autonomy during this time. And I think that I've had a lot of teachers reach out thanking the district for it's such a hard time to work in. I think in districts where teachers have little autonomy, prior to this crisis and then during this crisis, I think those teachers are struggling even more because things aren't making sense to them. So I think just allowing people and trusting teachers during this time is important and has the potential to bring the stress level down a little bit, at least. That's in our control.
Mm-hmm. And Tony, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, one of the things that we did with this, we focused on providing that training throughout the district. So we did what we call ACEs training, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what we walked away with is a lot of adults didn't realize how they may have experienced something that had them traumatized from childhood. And so we want to ensure that through that training, one, we had our radars up on how we support those individuals. With that, we bolstered the number of grief counselors and individual support staff to provide support to our, not only our teachers, but individuals at central office and throughout the organization. And we really are focused on how do we shore up what our social emotional learning curriculum will look like, so we all can be speaking from the same language throughout the district, and not just think it's something that may affect students, but also adults suffer as well. So we started that this year. A lot of people walked away with a newfound awareness around what some of those look-fors are and some of those signals that someone may be experiencing. So I think that will pay huge dividends as we go forward coming back from this crisis.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, but just as a reminder, there are a lot of questions in the chat room about the predictive insights that Tim was walking through. And I just want to reassure people, if you want to stay for a few more minutes, Tim will stay around to answer questions and to give you more information about predictive insights. Here's another one. Are there opportunities to leverage this time of parents serving as learning guardians to foster a stronger partnership with homes, Or will parents be all too willing to give back the responsibility to schools?
That's a good question. I think time will tell on that one.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah, and I agree that time will tell. If you go by the internet memes right now, I think, parents will be happy for the kids to be back in a brick and mortar school. But I think this is a good opportunity to build relationships with parents as well, from teacher to parent directly. And I think a lot of teachers are capitalizing on that.
So I think we're close to the end of our time. I'd love to just ask Arne for some final thoughts about the new normal and maybe about the thing that keeps you optimistic about what, despite the challenges, about where we'll ultimately land.
Yeah, these are all really, really thoughtful questions. And I'll just say that, this time, I don't like the term social distancing because we shouldn't be socially distanced. I like the term physical distancing. But if we've learned nothing else through all this, hopefully we have learned how interdependent we all are. And I think parents' appreciation for teachers has probably never been higher. But our role as parents to be our children's first and most important teachers has never been higher. Somehow in education, we always talk, it seems like a conflict or whatever between having very, very high academic expectations and then taking social and emotional learning and kids' mental health seriously. There's no conflict in any of this stuff. It's never either or, it's both and. And now more than ever, we all have to look out for each other. We have to take care of each other in ways that we haven't done before. We have to have the highest quality, world-class, social and mental and emotional health for students, for faculty, for staff, and I would add for our students' parents. I worry so much about parents who have had stability for a while and that's just disappeared and may not be coming back. And yes, we can never lower the bar or compromise on having the highest of academic expectations. So our common humanity has never been clearer. And if we can stick together, learn together, support each other, that ultimately, Jessie, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that all over the country. This is a horrible time. I never wish we would be here. I, again, hope we're not here for another 100 years. But coming out of this, I think there's some extraordinarily powerful, inspiring lessons, not theoretical, but real lessons in real life where people are taking care of each other in extraordinary ways. And if that continues, then we're going to be better and stronger, more united, more cohesive than we were before this.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of everybody at DreamBox Learning, I want to thank you, Arne, Mark, Antonio, and Darren, not only for joining us today, but for what you do day in and day out to make sure that every kid can thrive. So we look forward to partnering with you, even if we don't know what that partnership is going to look like over the next couple of years. And we want to hear from you if there are things that you need from folks like us that will make your work easier to serve kids and teachers. So thank you all, and I hope some of you will stay for a little more information about the DreamBox Predictive Insights. Thank you for joining.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists. That was excellent information, and thank you, as Jessie said, for all that you're doing. For those of you who are DreamBox partners and are going to stick around for about 15 more minutes, I appreciate your time as we tell you about the exciting predictive insights that I just teased a little bit, but also just to give you some more information. So I know time is valuable, so I'll cut right to the chase. But as I had said earlier, without state testing data, without spring testing, without kids in schools, whether or not you have existing interim or benchmark assessments that you'd be using, there's a great need for data because we don't know what's happening with our students, and we want to serve them best whenever schools come back to normal. So as I had shared, this is the preview. We're going to be releasing this in just a couple of weeks. It was originally planned for this fall, and we rushed it to get administrators a high-level view of how every school using DreamBox is doing or would be doing if they were on the taking the state test right now, how grade levels are doing, and then each individual student as well. So I'll walk you through this before you, I'll dig into this so you can see the video. When you see the video, it will make a little more sense. But basically, our predictive models put students into sort of like, we have 3 different kinds of predictions. We have on track, which is the green, which means they would be proficient on your state test of the state level standards, your assessment of state level standards. If you have like multiple levels of proficiency, like a proficient and advanced, we don't make that distinction. Instead, we just say these are the students who we know are going to meet the state standards on the test. We also have a blue group, the potentially on track. That's where the things that they're doing, you know, as with any predictive model, your weather forecasts or whatever, there is a little bit of noise in the data that typically when students use DreamBox more from this group, we are able to get a better prediction and either move them into the on-track predictive group, or orange, the not on-track predictive group. And we have this starting very early in the school year, just 6 weeks in. Students and teachers, you know, at the start of school, take about 6 weeks to get to know each other. And in the same way, when students use DreamBox as recommended for the first 6 weeks of school, we then, you know, typically around October 1st, depending on your school start date, we have a prediction just 6 weeks into the school year, which is pretty cool. And then you have it monthly from that point on. We also have 2 groups here in the gray that you can see. One is low usage. Students have not used DreamBox enough to generate a prediction. And in order to generate a prediction, we don't require the full recommended 5 lessons per week. It's really just 2 or more lessons per week at a minimum to get a prediction. So it's a pretty low bar for getting a prediction for students. And then of course, the students who've not used DreamBox at all, they haven't even logged in. So for those of you who are trying to help drive more DreamBox usage and get students logging in more, this data is a great way to help with fidelity of implementation. So I'm gonna go back to this video now to show you this again. This is live data anonymized from the district. And here's how it plays out. So you'll be able to go back. Obviously, a lot of students have not been in school, so maybe usage over the past couple months has been inconsistent, but you can go back to prior months to when students were in school to see what those predictions were. You can choose your grade level and take a look at each school, at each grade level, how students would do. Obviously, there's not state tests for grades K through 1. However, we do have the predictions for those grades based on the state standards at those grades using other assessments from those grade levels. Then we have the month-over-month view, so you can see how those predictions are changing over time. And in this particular school district, you can see in grade 3 and grade 4 and then grade 5. And you see as the test date gets closer, more students are on track. We see better usage as the test date gets closer, but what we're excited for districts to have is the data right now at the individual student level, which this is what that will look like. You'll be able to drill down to school levels and grade levels and see which students are on track, which students are not on track. And this is not going to be in a couple weeks. It's only going to be at the district administrator view. We're going to be rolling out other administrator views over time. The teachers will have this report specifically on their dashboard come this fall. We really wanted to hurry to get the administrator view out because we know how important the data are for you, for planning, for summer school, and just to get a sense since all of the tests have been canceled. So we're excited that this empowers educators. It's going to give you spring 2020 proficiency data you need, and you're not going to have to do any additional testing. State tests are canceled. We can give you the insights you need right now about how students would have performed if they had taken the test. And the great thing is you're not going to lose when school comes back into session. There's no additional testing required. There's no time lost to testing. You just use DreamBox as normal. And while students are learning, we're also using the data to figure out who's on track for success in the spring. For right now, you'll be able to use those data to plan for summer school, plan for fall, whatever that might look like in your district as you serve your community and your students. We recommend when this comes out in a couple weeks, just using the data similar to how you might use your state test scores if you had them right now. It is a piece of data that hopefully is a surprise and a delight and an unexpected powerful tool for you at this time when you might be needing some data more than before. And kids don't have to do anything differently. If when you get this, we've got a whole lot of information about this when we roll it out to you. But If students don't have a prediction, they haven't been able to use DreamBox. And I realize, as we just heard on the webinar, not every student has access right now. There are some simple things you can do that if students do have access, if they just do 12 lessons in DreamBox over the next 2 weeks, we can get that prediction so you can have those data in May. It's a good way to engage with parents and get some meaningful predictive insights out of the student usage. And then lastly, this is a big question everybody has, is important to our research team and all of us here at DreamBox, is how accurate is it? And it's 85% accurate. That's how accurate our predictions are, which is on par with major state and major interim and benchmark tests. So highly reliable and highly accurate. So in short, here's just a couple of brief FAQs. We leverage the data and statistical models that we've built using external test scores. We've had data sharing partners with DreamBox for the past 3 years as we've been incubating and developing this. And there's nothing you need to do to get started. It's 85% accurate. We're going to give you monthly reports, as you just saw. And the last thing that is really important to mention is that we're releasing this right now at no cost for not only right now, but also for this coming school year of 2020-2021. Our original plan had been for additional pricing and additional cost for this data capability and this data functionality coming this fall. But in light of everything that you've just heard on the panel that you're experiencing in your communities, we knew that the right thing to do was just to make this available basically from now for all of the DreamBox licenses that run through the end of 2020, like this next coming school year. So through basically June 30th of 2021, you'll have access to it right now for planning, and then come back to school, whether or not you use an interim benchmark test. Like, you don't have to add anything. You can just use DreamBox's assessments. DreamBox's Predictive Insights to figure out where students are when they get back to school. I know as we heard on the webinar, for a lot of schools, you're trying to figure out, how am I going to find out where kids are when they get back to school? And there's going to be a lot of social and emotional needs, to be sure. And I know I was a K-12 math coordinator. We generated our own benchmark tests. I didn't really enjoy giving tests, but we needed the data. So with DreamBox Predictive Insights, you don't have to lose additional time to testing. You can just wait a couple weeks and we'll generate those predictions for you, because at the end of the day, you want to know, first of all, who's on track, and second of all, how can you help them? So we're giving you those data without any loss to instructional time and included with your existing DreamBox license for next school year. All right, I saw someone have their hand raised. Question, the minimum lessons needed to get that 85% predictive insight. It's just what our predictions do is they work on a rolling 6-week average. So we're never just using data from one day or one lesson. We're always looking back at the whole of what students have done over the prior 6 weeks as we update the predictions month over month. And we're basically able to get to those 85% accurate predictions with a minimum of 12 lessons over the past 6 weeks. So yeah, it's quick to get predictions for students once the school year starts. Oh, great. I see some questions. Yeah, complete 12 lessons over the next 2 weeks once this report comes out for students who are not, once we're into the school year, that's basically how long it takes. If you're not a current DreamBox customer, I see Nia's question here, can student data still be generated? They can be once a student starts playing, but that's something we'll need to take a look at your specific situation. Certainly for schools where kids have been using DreamBox since the start of the school year, you'll have way more students, way more predictions, way more data. Nia, without knowing your exact situation, it's hard to say, but for the most part, we can get kids those predictions even if they've just now started on DreamBox and just recently got an account. So great question. We don't have it for 6th through 8th grades right now. What we've done, as I said, over the past 3 years with our DreamBox data partners, those have all been basically at the elementary levels, that we've been looking for middle schools to partner with us as district data sharing partners, where we can run, really deep analyses, quasi-experimental studies with our research team and your assessment teams, and then have those data also to help build a 6th through 8th grade model. So if you're a middle school that would like to partner with us on data, we don't have middle school predictions anytime set for the near future, but we're always looking for districts to partner with to help get some data. is the data available as an export in CSV format? That's a specific question that I don't 100% know the answer to. During our early feedback program, we did provide a CSV to the districts that were working with us over the past 2 years on the early feedback program. But I believe at the very least in 3 weeks, the CSV probably won't be there, but the student names will be on the dashboard. Paula asked again, can I explain the K2? Yeah, so a lot of districts do have interim and benchmark assessments that they do administer for grades K through 2, such as like NWA map growth. So when we've gotten data points like that for grades K2, we've done the exact same thing, built a predictive model and then validated it. And because those tests are giving us data and have correlations with individual state standards, we're able to make a determination about student proficiency on those state standards, even though there's no state test. Great question. Because DreamBox is at home, we do have this on our FAQ. I need to figure out a better way to pop the questions out because I'm having a hard time seeing them here. Thanks for all your patience. Glad y'all have stuck on here. Glad you're finding this helpful. We're pretty excited about it and glad you are too. So DreamBox has gone home now. Maybe some parents, maybe some siblings are helping out a little bit too much. So that's a big, that is kind of a risk, if you're in a closed testing setting as well. I remember, as a teacher, got to set the desks up a certain way on test day, give A/B forms and stagger them, walk around the room, with fitness and all that. So because we're looking at so much data over the past 6 weeks and a certain number of lessons, it's not, it would require a very significant investment of time for a parent or a peer or a sibling to work with and sit with students that long. And remember, like, if a parent, we've always recommended that parents and siblings don't help a student, just as you don't want your child getting your Amazon book recommendations or Netflix, TV recommendations. You don't want DreamBox giving, lessons that are recommended for a parent who understands something and sort of explained it to a student. But even if that does happen for a couple of lessons, the next lessons the student is not going to probably do well on because they didn't really own the learning. They didn't really understand the concept, and therefore DreamBox is going to adapt them back to those lessons that they'll need to do on their own, and those data inform our predictions as well. So it's highly reliable, and that's a great question. Meredith asked, what's the anticipated cost per student next year? We don't have that locked down yet, so I don't have that number for you. All right, I think I've now answered all of the questions that were popping in. Thank you all for staying. We're really excited. You'll be hearing about this very soon, and it's just going to be a couple of weeks. I know that as a former teacher and district math administrator, yeah, this would have really helped out with our summer school planning, our fall planning. We wanted to connect with our students as much as we could, and at this time where you're just not sure where they are, we're able to provide not only these predictions, but also the great information we always provide about, if a student is having difficulty with division, division with remainders, for example, we're still flagging that. You have all of our great DreamBox reports to dig in more about how to help students. And in the short term, we were excited to accelerate this, to be adaptive, just as all of you are being adaptive. Again, appreciate all that you all are doing to support your communities, your students, your staff. We are grateful to be your partners in this and to help. We know that most of you are relying on DreamBox. For those of you who've done your own analyses, you heard it from the panelists. We ask for just an hour a week. At this time of remote learning, probably 2 hours is a good thing too, but even if it's only 1 hour per week and 5 lessons, we know that students are growing 50% more on external tests than they would otherwise. And that's the level of impact and support that we hold ourselves to that high standard as well. But we also know that that's especially what's needed right now, given the uncertainty about what students are experiencing. So keep in touch with us. Let us know what you need. And thank you to Jessie for hosting the panel. Thank you to our panelists and to the DreamBox team who helped put this together and keep it all running smoothly, and got in touch with you all to join us today. So thank you very much.